Welcome to another Quantum Conversation. I'm Loren Gailey, and I invite you to sit back as we enter the quantum realm, that space of the greater part of you. It is your connection to infinite possibilities, infinite potential, and infinite mastery. Welcome, beautiful hearts. We are very excited to talk with our next presenter in this summit series, Developing Psionics, where we're talking about channeling, the clairs, and extrasensory awareness. Jules Arnes is a new earth medicine woman, let's say, because she has been developing her psionics and bringing forward new earth products that actually make us superhuman. Today, we're talking about the powers of our intuition and how to unlock your intuitive powers, because this is the path to new human potential. Let's welcome Jules Arnes. Hi, Jules. Thank you for being here again.
It's my pleasure, Lauren. I'm so happy to be here.
So this is very interesting because all of the work that you've done is highly related to you developing your intuition, you opening up yourself multidimensionally to receive information. And this is information from your guides. This is information from beloved dear ones who've transitioned to the other side. And here we're talking about the 963 frequency and what you've done with this, and it's quite remarkable. So share with us an update on the most current aspects of this work that you're bringing forward.
Yeah, so it keeps growing. Though I do feel like, especially just in these last few days, it's all kind of coming together to where it's way more grounded and way more accessible, let's say, because as we are ascending as humans, we want to make that complicated because it's something that we don't understand, or it is kind of abstract. Like, what does it mean to ascend the body, to ascend our mind, to ascend what it is that we perceive as reality? And of course, I've been highly on this journey for my whole, like, since I was 16, but really, when I started teaching how to reprogram on a cellular level and really dove into using an element called ormus, did I start to open up on a level that I really didn't think was possible. And I'm going to say, just within this last few days, I finally kind of all of the pieces clicked together to where I could put a little bow on it and be like, oh, okay, so here is how you do it. And intuition is one of those spaces where, yes, we call it a superpower, but it's a sense, right? And we very often will rely on our physical senses. But when we become quantum, or we awaken the quantum body, activate all 12 strands of DNA, we start to use intuition, or those clairs, over our physical senses. And I have a saying that, you begin to see, you hear before you hear, without entering the programmed mind, and you feel with beyond emotion. Emotion is actually the last chemical response. And there's ways of receiving information that are way beyond what our emotion is. And so I say that we can feel in frequency where we can receive information without moving into the emotional body. So that's kind of where things are. And I'm just super excited to share a little bit more about ormus and what we can do with that to awaken that human potential.
Beautiful. So what is ormus? For those who are not so clear on it, some may have a really good idea of what it is and have been working with it. But for those who are unaware, what is ormus? What does that stand for, and where does it come from?
So ormus stands for orbited rearranged monoatomic element or unidentified substance. And another word for it is food of the gods, monatomic gold, even mana. And it has been around since the Egyptian ages. And we'll go through this when we get to my sharing my screen to show the slides. But it really has been around since the Egyptian ages, is as far back as I have gone, though I think it's also in the Bible. So it's been around. It is a substance that can be ingested, and it has an alchemy that is very, very ancient. And I'll talk about my story about how I received the alchemy for the ormus that I make. And but it's been used to activate the pineal gland, to activate the DNA. And back in the Egyptian ages, they actually ate it, and they called it food of the gods. That's what the gods ingested to create eternal life. And they became open channels of the divine, and were able to obviously create some amazing pyramids and all these wonderful things that they did back then that we still can't figure out how they did.
Yes, okay, excellent. And so with the Ormus, I love how it activates the DNA and
Mhm.
how it advances the intuition. So how do you use it? As you say, you ingest it with your product. Are we ingesting it? Are we putting it on the body? What are the ways to work with it in this case?
Right. So, a part of my special offer, I actually go through a couple of different ways that you can use it. But Ormus itself is a multidimensional element. And anytime that we're bringing it into our field is resonating between matter and spirit, or form and spirit, if you will, because it's holding both. The element itself is in a spin state, meaning that the atom is spinning, where most often an element you would look at it under a microscope and you would be able to look at it and say that's the element of copper or of gold. But with Ormus elements, because the atoms are spinning, they actually shift from matter to spirit, because it's moving into the quantum field and coming back. Because of that, it's also bringing in life force energy into the body. It's working with the body, reminding both body and consciousness that we too are both form and spirit, but we're in a container. So if you think about that, well, what does that mean? That our container, or our body, is multidimensional. It's both form and spirit, and it opens up consciousness to having the experience of what we are on a multidimensional level.
Wow, okay. So if it's bringing in life force energy, do we use our intention? And so do we meditate with it and access that quantum field from there? Or just by it being in our field, it opens us up naturally? How have you received it when you're working with it?
But when I first had my first bottle, after I kind of successfully mastered the alchemy of it, I knew that it wasn't something that I was going to ingest right away, because of how powerful it was just to hold it in my hands. And so I started putting drops in my bathtub and taking baths with the frequency in my bath. And it really started to open me up. And I'll never forget the day I actually first ingested it. I ingested it, and I went through, I guess, time warps, you could say. I was working on a project, and I looked up, and I was supposed to be at my daughter's school to pick her up within 5 minutes, and it's a 15-minute drive. So I went and got in the car, and as I'm driving, I just kept going through that same moment when I was looking at the time to see that it was 5 o'clock. I kept like going back into my kitchen, and then I'd be in my car, back in the kitchen, and be back in my car. And before I knew it, I was pulling up into the front of the school, and only 5 minutes had passed, even though it's impossible to drive 15 minutes in 5 minutes. So I had kind of skipped through time and I was like, okay, there's something to this. I'm gonna definitely go all in and have the experience of what we really have the capability of doing.
I love that. You are bending time. And I think the code that you held was calmness.
Mm.
um, Time traveling, going back into that. That's amazing. That's almost miraculous how that happened. Okay, so that awaits all of us. And Ormus, so I know you've got some slides. Let's have you dig into those and share more on this beautiful substance, this multidimensional element.
Okay, so I'm gonna pull it up here and go to my slideshow. Let's see, there we go. All right, so here is Ormus, and I call it the alchemy of human evolution because it is just the most powerful substance. There is so much capabilities that when we open ourselves up to the power that it has, and really, what all it's doing is opening up the power within ourselves. It's a reflection of what we have the capability of being, and that is to hold high states of consciousness in both form and spirit beyond space and time. So, we've talked a little bit about what Ormus is, and this is kind of just a highlight of that, of how it has been called the food of the gods, that it's in a spin state. It is activating human consciousness. It's interacting with our bodies. And for me, is an element that we're bringing into our body and reminding our cells, our DNA, that it's more, that it is multidimensional, that we are both form and spirit at the same time. We're not either one or the other, we're both, we're multidimensional. And that's what this element is bringing forth for us. So here's my slide that we are both form and spirit. And let me see if there's something in here that I feel is important. I think the other part of this that I feel like is important to say is that this truly is a time where our body comes with us. It sometimes when we think of activating intuition and kind of opening up as a channel, we think that we're going somewhere else, or we're doing these high conscious retreats or processes. And, they say, oh, I have this outer body experience. But what's being called to us now is to bring those experiences into the physical and really activate what our physical being is on a multidimensional level, because we're not really going anywhere, right? Like nothing exists outside of ourselves. We're all part of the field. Our body is part of that quantum field. Our body is the quantum field. And how we're holding consciousness and the experience of that really opens us up to breaking through density belief systems, what I call the matrix, that we start to recognize how programmed we are to exist in a certain reality. And one of the most distorted operating systems there is the way that we see our own body. We're only living 2 of 12 strands of DNA. That's all we're studying. That's what we're experiencing. And when we start to add an element like Ormus into our lives and we start to use the tool of intuition, we start to hold our consciousness more multidimensionally. And what we find is that our body is actually has an intelligence within it, and that intelligence is the frequency of source, and that can be measured at 963 hertz. So I feel like we can skip past this one because we've kind of talked about that. So this is where I want to kind of go to next. Actually, I really love this slide. So Ormus activates superconductive consciousness. It supports consciousness being held outside of the 2 of 12 strands of DNA. And what it does is it starts to activate the vortexes of our body. And this is such a fun thing to think about, just how powerful we are. So we have 50 trillion cells in our body. And each one of those cells has 1.4 volts of energy. Inside every single cell of our body, we have 150 trillion atoms. And an atom is really just energy, and it's a vortex. So if you think about that, 150 trillion atoms times 50 trillion cells, that's how many energy vortexes that our body has. And each one of those we're holding, I mean, we are such an advanced system. And when we start to activate those 12 strands of DNA and we activate the pineal gland, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit, we start to tap in to that energy, and we start to hold our consciousness inside of these vortexes, or really specifically, it becomes one vortex. And within that vortex, it is holding the intelligence that's transcribed in our DNA. When we start to activate the DNA, that frequency is released, and we have the ability to hold our consciousness in the center of the vortex. One of the biggest illusions that we have is that we're always in observation and we're observing through our programming, creating a programmed reality. But when we start to hold our consciousness in the center of these energy vortexes of our body that are holding the intelligence of source, everything slows down. Everything becomes very clean and pure, and we start to attune our consciousness to the intelligence that's stored in our DNA, which is the intelligence of source. Do you have anything that you want to reflect on before I keep going, Lauren?
No, I just think it's so incredible as we tap into this voltage that we are.
Mm.
And it reminds us how quantum we are as matter and spirit. Ormus is both matter and spirit. We are that wave and that particle, and that is always moving. So there's nothing to get despaired about or upset about, because we can change in every moment. I guess that's my point. And realizing that we can hold consciousness within us, that is a superpower. So
Mm.
it's mind-blowing, actually.
And I love that you brought that up, because knowing that our body is basically trillions of energy vortexes, what makes the illusion that we're solid is that we're touching the outside of a vortex. So just like if you were to touch the outside, you get too close to a tornado, because it's spinning so fast, it propels anything that's trying to enter it. Well, that's what we are too. That's why we have the illusion that we're solid. But if we bring our consciousness to the center of that vortex, then we have the ability to shift very quickly, because we're no longer trying to shift something that is propelling us. We're entering the center of it to where we can actually shift on an energetic level. And this is also, this is science. This isn't even woo-woo anymore, which is so fun for me, because I love science, but I also love spirituality, and they truly are closer than they ever have been. And it's really exciting. Okay,
Yes.
let's keep going. Okay, so now we're going to get to the fun stuff, because um my journey with Ormus, I feel like there was the day before Ormus and there was the day after. I've been on a spiritual path studying energy since I was 16 years old. So it's been over 30 or 3 decades, 3 decades, 30 years. And one of the things that we hear so much about is activating the pineal gland, and how things like our toothpaste and processed food, and just the way that we are programmed, that our pineal gland can get calcified. And yes, that is true. But if you think about our pineal gland is also multidimensional. And if we're putting all of our focus on just the 2 of 12, then yes, we may have trouble opening up our pineal gland because we're focusing on the programmed existence or just the physical existence of our pineal gland. But the other 10 strands or the other 10, all 12, are acting together, and why we're so focused on the pineal gland just on the physical level and what it's doing on a physical level because of what we're doing physically, we're bypassing or we're missing out on all of the other 10 strands of or the multidimensional experience of our pineal gland is already fully activated, and it is beyond space and time, and it cannot be interrupted because it's holding the frequency of source. So when we start to introduce ormus into our life and we start to activate the pineal gland, and it does this without us having to try. That's the beauty about the ormus, is that it is a conscious living element. It is life force energy, and it knows exactly what to do to awaken consciousness to being held in the full spectrum of our pineal gland. And our pineal gland is also connected to an advanced DNA system that is connected to every cell in our body. So when we're activating our pineal gland and we're releasing that frequency of 963 source intelligence, I also call it activating the divine molecular technology, or DMT, which is, we'll talk a little bit about DMT here in just a little bit, but we're activating our whole body. So when we're activating the pineal gland, we're activating the DNA of every cell of our body. We're activating that voltage of 1.4 volts in 50 trillion cells, all starting to spin at a higher spin state. And we'll go into more of the science of what actually happens with the cells here in just a minute. Did you have anything you wanted to reflect on here?
Well, for you, when you felt your pineal gland activating with your experience with Ormus, what
Mhm.
began to happen in your experience?
Well, the very first thing that started happening was my dream state got very active. I actually started meeting myself in dream state, and I was giving myself a blueprint of how to build a scalar device. And so that was actually the next step. And the Ormus that I have does have scalar frequency in it. It's holding a frequency of that 963, and it's also working with how the operating system is turning on. So it's structured, you could say, just like you can structure water. The Ormus itself is actually structured with specific scalar frequencies of the device that kind of came through. And that's when I started adding frequency to the Ormus, is when I started seeing how powerful what I had really was. I mean, I was a healer at the time up in Breckenridge, Colorado, and I was seeing things like bones healing in 2 days. That like hardware that people had in their body, that the body pushed it out and healed the bone. Varicose veins that were about to get operated disappearing in 30 minutes. I mean, some of the thing, I had a lady got her hearing back. It was just, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I knew in that moment that this element has the capability to work with our body and our consciousness to advance not just healing, but the way that we're experiencing our body.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so with that, this is also just a really exciting thing that, as we open up our pineal gland, we organically begin to open the quantum heart. And this is truly a portal, or the portal to experiencing not just the multidimensional body, but the multidimensional mind. And you could say multidimensional spirit, but you're like, well, isn't it already multidimensional? But what I love about that is it means that we're no longer seeing our spirit as separate. We're no longer identifying we're either this or that. When we fully turn on the quantum body and we move in and experience our quantum heart, everything is unified. And all of a sudden, instead of observing something, we're very still. And, whether you want to call that the now moment or the connection with source, and we have longer periods of time where we're not trying to figure things out. We're not oh gosh, all the distortions, right? When we're not in the mind anymore, we're in a space where we're receiving information that's outside of what our programming or what our mind is saying. We're starting to tap into a very clean intelligence, and there's very little gap between the consciousness that is listening to that intelligence and the intelligence itself. And the more we fine tune or attune our consciousness to that frequency that's being activated as we activate the pineal gland, the easier it is to start tapping into very clear, precise guidance. And the places of feeling confused or not knowing where you're getting the information or if this is the right thing or this is the wrong thing, and how we just get so wrapped up and can spiral in just making a simple decision. It gets very clear, right? When you're responding to the intelligence that's stored within you, and when you're not. It becomes so clear. And it doesn't mean that it's easy, but at least you know the difference. And once you know the difference, you can learn to master that. And that's when life gets really fun. All right, so let's keep going here. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about how I was actually given the alchemy of Ormus. And I just started talking about this again. It's been a while, and I don't know that I've really shared the full story. So I'll just kind of shorten the story here. But back in 2015, my friend Rob passed away. And I like the day that he called me and told me that he was dying, I knew why he was calling me. When I was going to reach there's the phone, I heard he's calling to tell you that he's dying. And he died 30 days later of a rare form of cancer. And as I sat with him for those 30 days and he started to kind of move outside of his physical form, we got closer over that 30 days because we started to connect more on a frequency level. And when he passed away, I of course was crying, and he came to me and he said, "Don't cry or you're not going to be able to hear me." And in that moment, I was like, you know what? Let's go. I know we're just starting our relationship right now. And so over a 30-day period of time, I attuned my consciousness to him as he traveled multidimensionally on the other side. And there came a moment where he kind of stopped ascending, you could say. He stopped transitioning. And I came into a space where it was just completely dark, but I could tell that there were other energies there and there was an intelligence there. And I was welcomed into the circle and started getting guidance. And the first time that I entered, I was given an equation. And when I came out of the altered state that I was in, I actually was holding a pencil and I had a piece of paper and I had written down an equation. It took about maybe 3 to 4 weeks of consistently going in and doing this before I got the full equation of Ormus. And I won't go into the journey of how everything, because it was kind of fun, some of the things that came through and how they gave it to me. But everything was in equations and numbers, and I had to go and do the scavenger hunt to figure out what does it mean, right? Because I didn't even know what Ormus was at the time. And so then I got to a place where it came full circle and I made my first batch. And then that's when I sat and held the ormus and knew at that point that what I had in my hand was not to be taken lightly and that it needed to be honored in a very sacred way. And I've done my best to honor this the alchemy that has come through me. And of course, it continues to evolve as I evolve. Do you have any questions about that, Lauren, before I move on?
That is so beautiful. What a beautiful story, and such a beautiful lesson for you. And I would like to ask, do you still connect with your friend Rob? Are you still and what's he up to? I mean, what's your relationship like in this partnership?
Yes, he's still such a huge part of my life, and it's definitely changed. I mean, gosh, that was 9 years ago. It's hard to believe that it was that long ago now, and also the what I ended up calling the Council of Light. You know, it's funny when I was receiving messages and there were 12 energies and it was fun to watch just to have the experience of the exchange between them. And but now, you know, being where I am and the more I go inside and the more I activate my quantum body, not only are those 12 energies inside of me, but they were my 12 strands of DNA. And that wasn't revealed to me until probably about a year ago and that's why it couldn't be named because they wouldn't name themselves. And they're like, we don't have names. Like, you can't name 12 separate energies that are holding a transcribed frequency of source. It's like, well, to name it was to diminish what it was. It was something that I had to experience for myself. And in that, is the same thing happened with Rob, is that he's an intelligence that is connected to these 12 strands or within the field of my body. And though I feel him, I know it's him, but he is in the unified field of my consciousness. So it's a different relationship than what it was in the beginning. It took quite a journey to get to a place where I could like create the field and hold it consciously in a fine-tuned way enough that I recognized that there was never a separation. And I needed there to be a separation so that I could be outside of myself. But now it's all unified. It's hard to explain what that means. I hope that makes sense.
Wow, it really does. And what you said there about your the intelligence of your DNA, the energy of your DNA, this is something we can all contemplate and meditate on and attune to. And that right there is so expansive. And I think everyone wants that. And so the Ormus is a beautiful tool that assists that. But isn't that spectacular that how would we attribute this? That it is multidimensional information. The
Yeah.
10 strands of DNA are multidimensional through all time and space. How would you categorize that?
So the way I like it to look at it is everything is source energy and everything is, if you want to call it, I call it the source field is kind of what I actually prefer to call it because then okay, so if let's just say that that's true, which I feel science is pretty much proven that there's a fabric that's holding a very specific intelligence. That intelligence, if you want to call it source, divine, God, whatever you want to call it, and it can be measured. There's a specific frequency that it holds. Well, we are part of that. We are that. And so where we hold consciousness within that source field is going to be our experience. And our body is that source field. So when we continue to attune to the intelligence that's stored, it's transcribed in our DNA. And I think I have a slide where I talk about this a little bit. then we start to shift from kind of that more duality or programmed reality into identifying in the source field until our consciousness actually hits the frequency of 963 for a prolonged enough period of time that we actually enter that frequency altogether. And then we just become the intelligence, because consciousness is just the tool. It's the tool that we use to realign ourselves back into fully becoming the intelligence of source. It is the ascension tool. And by activating all 12 strands DNA, but if you really think about it, all 12 are already activated. It's just where we're holding consciousness is where we're having the experience of that, right? So when we say we're activating the frequencies and activating the DNA, really what we're saying is we're using intention so that our consciousness can move into an experience by asking for it. But all 12 strands we're already multidimensional. And this is part of human evolution. And not only is it part of human evolution, but now more than ever, activating our full potential and experiencing our body as multidimensional is very, very important. And I won't go into the long story behind what I'm saying right now. At some point, I'll share it in a future interview that we have together, Lauren. But it really is like there's a reason that we're all feeling the awakening and that we're in the shift. And it's going to happen whether we want to or not. So why wouldn't we actively participate in the evolution that's what's happening? And I think if they're listening to this show, then that's what we're all here to do, right? And here we are. So here's the DMT. It's activating and awakening the quantum body. And so DMT is a frequency, and it's also a chemical that is released from our body when we're born and when we die. And then, of course, for those of you that have done played in psychedelics, you know that is another time that DMT is actually released from the pineal gland. And this frequency, when we're born, it's a chemical is released from the pineal gland and it floods the body. And at the same time, of course, the chemical also has a frequency, and we've already measured that frequency. Science has already measured it at 963. So DMT, the chemical that is released from your pineal gland, is the frequency of 963, which is also the frequency of source. This is how this frequency is transcribed in our DNA. It's there. It's an activation that happens when we take our first breath, if you will. And when that happens, consciousness is also activated in the body. So we are given the two things that we need to fully ascend the body. We have the transcribed intelligence of our DNA, and we have consciousness to attune to what that intelligence is saying. And I'll just go for a quick little, well, how do you know this? And I'll just tell you how I received this information. Another friend of our family's passed away, Vale, on his 22nd birthday. And he came to me about a week after he passed away and gave me the equation of cell ascension. And he showed how the body is distorted and that we're running those just 2 of 12 strands of DNA. And that because that we are in a distorted operating system of the body, and that's what's creating age and disease. And that when all 12 strands are activated, that we don't actually die. And that we have the ability to attune our consciousness to the intelligence of our DNA to ascend the body into a frequency. And this isn't coming from this place of, oh, I don't want to die. This is our natural state of being. And this is kind of connected to the next stage of evolution as well, is that not only is this part of our evolutionary process, but it is a process that is needed, and that we all are going to eventually get here. But the ones that of us that are actively participating in this ascension that we can speed it up. And there are light workers, way showers that are here to specifically have this experience right now. And I'm going to say I see it happening within the next 10 years that we're going to start to break the barriers of what we are identifying as human. Do you have a
That
reflection?
is miraculous, and you are on the cutting edge of that. And so here it is. It's really fascinating. So when we activate the 12 strands of DNA, and you say they already are activated, but it's where we're holding our consciousness. So then what is the task at hand? How can you help us understand how we hold our consciousness
Mm. And
into the 12 act to the other 10 strands of DNA?
so it is an attuning process. And that's what I love about what you're presenting today is tapping into our psychic abilities and really learning to use intuition, the clairvoyance, claircognizance, all of our clairs to start to identify through frequency over form. So over our senses that we identify more on a physical level when we start to activate the clairaudience, clairvoyance, clairsentience, claircognizance, we actually start to attune to that intelligence and we're receiving information outside of our programmed experience or outside of the distorted operating system. And when we do that over a long enough period of time, the ascension process, of course, continues to raise our consciousness until that distortion starts to get less and less, and we start to get clearer and clearer until we start to kind of shift over to the other side. And that's when we go into that quantum heart space and we really start to see that there is a difference and we know, oh, I'm in the operating system, the distorted operating system, or I'm in the divine operating system. And the more that we shift over into the divine operating system, the more our body actually begins to change and shift. So we have the experience both consciously and physically.
I love that. Thank you for explaining that again, because this is the work then that we do, and developing our intuition comes from practice
Yes.
and hindsight, right? And so that is a good thing to do. And I love how Ormus opens it up even more. So
Mm.
it's a powerful tool. Okay, awesome. Paying attention to the intuition. We know what we know inside us, and we just attune to it.
And we attune to it. And I love that word attuning because it really is just like if you're tuning a piano and you have a tuning fork, let's just say, and you're trying to match the key of the piano to the tuning fork. That's the same thing that we do with our consciousness. We turn on that frequency of source and our DNA, it activates in our body, and then we match our consciousness to that frequency. And what we start to find is that instead of our consciousness running through our distorted operating system or from our programmed mind, programmed body, programmed reality, that we start to experience reality through an intelligence that's so beyond that. And just by matching the frequency that's activated there. So what is the experience when we start to turn on these frequencies with, with Ormus or just by asking? And so Ormus is has superconductive properties. And just like I said before, that it actually creates a superconductive state of consciousness. Well, what does that actually mean? So what that means is that we have the ability to hold consciousness in frequency and that we don't actually have to fully move in and be in the physical form that we identify in right now. And that when we move ourselves into this superconductive energy, that our body and the biophotons of our body start to hold that specific frequency of 963, which puts us into a higher spin state. So what's happening then? our physical body actually begins to raise in frequency. Our cells raise in frequency. Our organs are raising in frequency. Our organs become multidimensional and start to release that distortion that it's running. Well, what happens then? Well, age and disease diminishes. We start to feel better. We have more energy. We have more clarity. We start to heal at a rapid rate. And one of the things that I really recognized for myself is that human growth hormone just goes insane, and your nails start growing really fast. And you heal from things really fast. Like I personally actually have healed a broken toe in less than 24 hours. And am I perfect at it? No, I'm not, but I'm definitely exploring it and doing my best to master it. And the other thing that Ormus does is it extends telomere length. And for those of you that know what a telomere is those little shoestrings that are on the ends of the DNA. And as we age, every time your cell divides, it shreds a little bit. Well, what it's doing is it's actually extending those telomeres. So when your telomere, kind of the shoestring goes all the way to the end, is when you die, basically. And you can imagine what it's like when your telomeres actually start to extend. And I know I've talked in the past how I've brought my telomeres to be over 30 years younger than I actually am, which is really exciting. And I actually just was at a conference in Beverly Hills, and they did uh, an EKG test where it can actually measure how healthy your body is. So it does your life force energy, your chakras, your brain balance, how old you are, your biological age. And I was able to have 100% across the board. I think there was one place I had 98%. I can't remember which one that was, but I think it was actually my chakras. It was my fourth chakra was 98% open. So I wasn't totally 100%, but this is what we have the capability of doing when we start to activate the multidimensional body.
Wow, that is amazing. That is amazing. So so then share with us, like for example, the broken toe. What did you do mentally, physically, emotionally? What was necessary for you to do to match that frequency that allowed that to heal so quickly?
You know what? That's such a great question. And I didn't do anything.
Oh,
I thought it was broken, and it was swelled up black and blue. I couldn't walk. I broke my toe, right? And the next morning I woke up and got out of bed, and I forgot that it even happened until my daughter asked about it. And she's like, "Oh, you're walking." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I forgot." And I looked down, and there was no black and blue, there was no swelling, and there was a little tiny red mark like across the top of it, but that's all that was there. And I couldn't believe it. Like I actually had to sit down because I didn't do anything. It did it itself.
everyone wants that. This is what we all strive for on all levels. People who have diagnosis, they're reaching for things. And so this is something for people to explore. Would you agree?
It's definitely worth looking into. I'll just tell you another quick healing story with Ormus. One of just this random friend that I kind of we bumped into each other and just became friends. His name's Hanasi. He's over in the UK, and he was in Bali and had a motorcycle accident and road rash. Like he was wearing shorts and road rash all over. And he called and asked if he could put the ormus on it. And I said, well, you can, but the elements are abstracted from salt, so it might hurt to put it on an open wound. And he's like, okay. So he I think it was not even 48 hours later. He is ranting and raving. He's like, you're not going to believe it. You're not going to believe it. He's like, not only is my skin completely healed over, but he's a black man. And so when it was all white, right? And you could start to already see his pigment coming through. So not only did he heal like to where there was no open wound, but where it was white, you could start to see his pigment coming back. And he said in the past that would take over 3 weeks to heal in the way that it was healing in less than 24 or less than 48 hours. So that was pretty exciting. I mean, the healing capabilities of this is through the roof.
And again, it's consciousness. It knows what to do. Sure, the intention, consciousness follows the intention. So the intention is key, as you said, asking for it. So we ask for it and hold the intention and watch what happens. Amazing.
I love how you say watch what happens because at that point we release the intention and let the body take over, right? Because once we ask, we have to get out of the way. We want to try to control it and make it happen. And, it was like, just get out of the way and have the experience of this higher operating system because it knows exactly what to do.
So could you take a drop of it under the tongue? Do you mix it with a drink? Do you just put it on the broken toe? Put it on the skin? Put it on your pulse points? Where are you putting the ormus?
All of the above. And I'll even in the my special package, I even have a thing where I erase wrinkles with it. So I'll put it right on my wrinkles and
Oh,
rub
really?
it in and tell the cells what I want them to do. And that's how I apply my skincare is I'll add the ormus before the skincare to activate those cells. So that's really fun, but it's kind of endless. I'm just trying to think of some other things that I've done, like cuts, is as much as it hurts, they go away so fast if you can stand to just have a little bit of the sting, putting it on an open wound. And what I loved about Hanasi's experience is he was just so, I wish I had his recording because he was just so excited about it. But he said, oh, my wounds are like open portals. Like I can feel the energy of the ormus like opening my body up. He couldn't even believe it. He had never had an experience with ormus before, so he didn't know what to expect. And but it really does. It starts to communicate with you and it starts to tell you what it's doing. And so whether you're fully attuned and can read it intuitively or not, it eventually it will start speaking to you and telling you different ways to use it.
Okay, very cool. Very, very cool. What a fabulous element for our lives at this time. And it's
It,
ancient. It's ancient.
it's ancient, and that is, if it worked it for the Egyptians for eternal life, I think that we can also activate these higher operating systems and move into an intelligence where we're at least holding no space, no time, because that is our innate being. And so with that, I talk a little bit here about, the matrix versus the source field and how what Ormus is really doing is it's sensitizing our consciousness enough where we can start to identify, am I in a programmed reality or am I in the source field? Am I in the purity of this intelligence? And knowing the difference is really everything. I mean, especially when we start to activate our intuition and we start to tap into receiving information outside of our programming, it can be a sensitive place to be. It's very vulnerable. And so when we really know what that frequency feels like to be within the source field, it allows us to move back into trusting our innate being over anything else. We stop seeking, stop looking out into the program reality to find the answers, and we start to learn to go in and in and in to where we really start to attune to that operating system as the most intelligent technology that there is. And when that starts to happen, life really starts to shift because we're no longer trying to push matter with matter. we're working in a vortex of energy where things start to speed up and we just start to open up to those miracle patterns is what I call it, because it really does start to feel that way. It just starts to blow your mind what we're capable of, and not just the healing and the information that we can tap into and how we can open up psychically, but also just the gifts of starting to see reality in this new way where you start to see that everything truly is the source field, and that judgment of good and bad starts to fade away, and you start to see the miracles in every situation, which is, I mean, isn't that what we all want?
It's so empowering, very empowering. It puts it all on us. We are in the driver's seat.
Yes, yes. Well, I know we're running out of time, so I was going to keep going, but I just want to honor your time and everybody's time. I don't want to go too over. I would say maybe this is where we'll kind of end here, is I'll just give a little quick tool of how you can know if you're in your programming or if you're starting to tap into the intelligence of your DNA. So this is one of my favorite exercises. So if you just want to shut your eyes and just imagine a sunflower. So you can, and if you have trouble seeing, just sense what a sunflower would be. Picturing a sunflower in your mind. And then just go ahead and open your eyes. And now shake that out. And now we're going to activate the DNA, activate that source field, activating your quantum body, releasing the frequency of source through your DNA, your pineal gland. And now you're going to ask the intelligence of source to show you a sunflower. And just notice how your body feels different. The image may be different, it may not. Notice how it comes in differently. So the difference is one you created from your mind, which is the third level of consciousness and down. And then the second one, you invited the intelligence to show you, and you stayed open to receiving information. And that's when we start to move into the quantum body and experience the fourth and fifth level of consciousness. So that is an easy trick that we can do that with anything. Anytime that we're wanting to see what it is. And, I always suggest doing easy things to begin with, where you don't have an attachment to what is going to be shown, so that you can strengthen that part of you. But all of that is taught in the intuition course that's part of the package.
I love that exercise. That was
Isn't
really cool. And so I just want to share maybe for a little reflection, and then we'll go into that course that people can learn much more about this. But when we first started that, it's like I saw it, it was very there. And then when we ask the source intelligence to show us, I don't know if this is my past history of it, but it was so much more full. There was so much more information coming in. The way the seeds are spiraled within the head of that sunflower, and the way, of course, it follows the sun, and the way the information of that sunflower is held. That's what I began to see. So I got that. That was very cool. So we can do this with everything.
Yeah.
I get this now. What a beautiful example in that exercise of how we begin to attune to that consciousness, to ask to be shown the information from the quantum heart. I love it. Really
Yeah.
cool. Okay. So I know people are going to want the Ormus, and this is a beautiful opportunity. And so I'm going to direct everyone to the webpage. Scroll down where you're watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's a link in the description box. Click it, and learn more about this opportunity. So, this course on developing intuition, let's start there.
Right. So I go through identifying, what level of consciousness you're in. And I actually use very specific DMT codes to activate the frequencies through the body and to teach actually how to attune your consciousness to those frequencies in order to and I go through claircognizance, clairvoyance, clairaudience, and clairsentience. So those are the four clairs that we focus on in the class. So you'll go through a whole module where you'll activate the frequency on a DNA level. You'll learn to attune your consciousness, learn to identify what level of consciousness you're in as you're receiving the information, and then have some tools of how to actually use it in your daily life. So it's really it's a fun but very powerful. I would say it's at an advanced level, but it's for beginners. So it's not going to be something that you're going to go pick up in a book. This is really taking you right into the heart of it and teaching you how to activate intuition through the quantum body so that you're right where you are. You can start to attune to those higher frequencies and experience it, not just consciously, but in your body as well.
Okay, and what are the three levels of intuition that you're going to go over in this course?
I love this question. So, yes, so the first level is kind of the level that we all know, and that's that gut feeling, right? Or, oh, I shouldn't go down that alley, or, oh, I need to turn here. Whether we're aware it or not, where our body is always directing us that way. The second level of consciousness is when we start to move into that fourth and fifth level of consciousness, where it just like this exercise that we just did, and we start to receive information by inviting the frequency to be activated and attuning and having information come in outside of just a primal response of the body. It gets very clear, more specific. That's where channeling, automatic writing, all those fun things starts to come in. And then the third level of consciousness is connected to the fifth level of consciousness, is when it becomes so automatic that we're not even recognizing that we're using the highest level of our, if you want to say, our intuition or our superpower. And that's when we actually see, we hear before we hear, we know before we have the thought, and we sense without actually moving into an emotional response of the body. And that's really full bio quantum, is when we're in that third level of intuition. It becomes our new way of being.
Yes, I absolutely love that. This is where we are becoming superhuman, and this is the work at hand. And so there's this higher state of consciousness that we're saying that we can propel ourselves into a reality beyond our imagination. And this is tapping into these higher level intuitive abilities. What's that like for you? I mean, beyond our imagination, that's like so open, just receiving, so it's beyond imagination. What's happening here?
Well, if you think about imagination is an awesome tool to use to get out of your programming, but it's still in more of that programming, because we're just like we imagine a sunflower. We know what that feels like. We're still pulling from the distorted operating system or the programmed operating system to create an image. And because of that, we're going to create another level of distortion. So when we actually move beyond imagination, is when we start to tap into the purity of the field, because it's holding an intelligence that's outside of what we can even understand. And when we continue to surrender our consciousness into that frequency, we start to open up to possibilities that are beyond our understanding. And that's a weird thing to think, but it is so much grander than what we could imagine.
And we are so ready to get out of that programmed reality and experience this quantum heart reality, super consciousness. It's real and it's multidimensional, and we're striving for that. So thank you for this course. And then the ormus that comes along with it, that will help this along the way. Tell us about this as well. That's a beautiful option.
Yes, so our scalar 33 Ormus is the Ormus that will be part of this package. It is holding the scalar frequencies of turning on the divine operating system. It also is releasing the frequency of 963 from the pineal gland. So it's working on activating the 12 strands of DNA, or at least activating that frequency so that you can start to tap into that consciously. Uh, this is kind of our go-to ormus for higher consciousness, but it also is amazing for erasing wrinkles. So anybody that is kind of like, oh, I want to try that, then this is the one that you'll use. It how it has a high spin state of ormus, which is very active. So it speeds up healing, all of those fun things.
Beautiful. Okay. Using Ormus instead of getting a facelift. Or even if you do that to actually assist in that healing process. Okay. Really beautiful ways that you're using this technology. And again, I just have to cap it off by saying you listened and you grounded this information. And that right there is so cutting edge, so leading edge that I'm just in awe by it. And I think everyone is. And I just commend you for it. And I do see the medical world someday. I mean, we're not there yet, but I'm wondering what the medical field would think about this and why we don't see Ormus. I mean, it's out there in other places. People are getting this technology. You're bringing it down through the information that you're receiving, but why it's not out there mainstream, I think we can see why, because it's a powerful tool. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, you know, I was just and when I was in Beverly Hills, I was with like some very high-end doctors. I mean, even the guy, I forgot his name, but he was the one that is doing all these intensive studies on COVID. He's the one that found that tampons were actually recreating toxicity, and very cutting edge, high end doctors. And I brought my copper card in Ormus. And you know what? Everyone was super open to it and were excited and could feel the frequency of things. And so, yes, that was like kind of a cutting edge conference that I was at. But I feel like we're starting to open up. But I also want to say that it is a very sacred element, and it's not one that we want to necessarily, how do I say it? We don't want it to be part of the distortion. We want it to be a part of the awakening. And so if it is calling you, it's for you, right? Because it will find the people that it's meant to find until it gets to a place where enough of us is holding the consciousness of this divine operating system to where it can just fully go mainstream. And I really feel like we're on the edge of that. But until then, I feel like it does. It just finds the people that are ready for it. And you know, you can feel that inner yes to something like this. And in that yes, you will honor it and it will honor you, and you'll create a relationship with your divine operating system. And this is just a tool of awakening that.
What a beautiful tool. Thank you so much for bringing it to us and sharing it with the planet in such a sacred way. Really, it's beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are so honored, and I know this is a popular item. So everyone, if this resonates with your heart, you will know it. If you're ready to advance your intuition and to tap into your superpower, this is your birthright. And this is a beautiful program to assist you in that. So check it out and explore the new you as you bring your superhuman powers online. Jules, as we say goodbye, any final thoughts?
Oh gosh, you know, I just want to thank you and thank everyone for listening. I just love holding this container, and I can feel everybody listening, and it always just opens my heart in such a beautiful way. So I just want to say thank you for being here with us and for being a part of the evolution of mankind. We are the way showers, and I just want to honor you, Lauren, and everyone for listening, because I know that's not an easy thing to be, especially with all the chaotic things that we're experiencing in the world. So just know that you're not alone. We're doing this together and you matter. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Jules, Arnes, for this beautiful conversation. And thank you all for watching. As Jules said, you matter, your love matters. And for that, we are grateful. Namaste. Thank you for listening to this quantum conversation, and thank you for dancing with us to the cosmic heart. As we raise our own vibration, we raise the vibration of the planet. This show is dedicated to you and all awakening hearts, as we are here to shine our bright light and amplify our love. I'm Loren Gailey, and from my sacred heart to yours, I honor your magnificent love and light. This has been a presentation of New Earth One Network, your home for New Earth living. Access information, education, and videos on living from the heart in unity consciousness. Visit newearth1.com.